All right. All right. Here we go. So this is document B. Now, with all of these documents, like we said, our goal is to be able to decide which system of citizenship was better. Who had better ideas about what it meant to be a citizen and how citizens should behave? The Romans and their republic, the Greeks and their direct democracy. So, with all of our DBQ documents, first thing we have to know is if it's a primary or a secondary source. So now, since this is a speech, it was done by the person who was there. So even though we're reading about it 2,700 years later, this is a primary source document because this person said this speech and they were there, right? So this is a primary source. Okay, I guess it was about 2,400 years ago. So I'm going to read this, and we should already have it highlighted, but there are some things that Greeks would have understood that we don't necessarily understand that make this make more sense. I shall say that Athens, it is the poor which mans the fleet. And when we talk about fleet, these are ships, right? And has brought the city or the state her power. And the steersmen and the boatswain and the shipmasters and the lookout men and the shipwright. These have brought the state her power, much more than the best born and elite. This being so, it seems right that all should have a share in offices filled by lottery or by election, and that any citizen who wishes should be allowed to speak. For if the poor and the common people and the worst elements are treated well, the growth of these classes will exalt, which means to glorify the democracy. So, here's what that means. Let's take it step by step because, again, there are things that they would have said that we might not understand. Okay? So he says, I shall say that Athens, it is the poor which mans the fleet. So, according to this guy, the old oligarch, who's the person who's out there working on the boats, working on the ships, and stuff like that? Which group of people? The poor. Now, remember, we learned already why was Athens able to be such a strong city state? What made them be able to be so strong? Their ships, the fact that they had a strong navy, the fact that they were able to trade, right? So that's where this comes in. And remember, we talked about when we read Aristotle and Alexander, we talked about inductive and deductive reasoning and logic. So here's the logic that he's using. The ships are why Athens is powerful, which we already knew that. The poor people are why the ships are powerful, right? Because if you don't have the poor people to do the stuff on the ships, then you don't have powerful ships. You don't have a powerful navy. You aren't able to trade. Therefore, the poor are why Athens is powerful, because if they don't work the ships, if they don't build the ships, Athens isn't able to trade. Athens doesn't have a strong navy. They're not powerful. Okay, does that idea make sense? Yes. Because you have to understand that for this to go. Okay, so he says, it is the poor which mans the ships and has brought the city-state her power. So then he goes and describes some of the jobs on the ship. The steersman, which is a person who controls the rudder. Captain tells you where to go. The steersman's the guy that moves the rudder. Okay. The boatswains. That's the person in charge of the physical upkeep of the ship, making sure it stays seaworthy and ready to float. And the shipmasters. The shipmaster is the person who owns the ship. Sometimes that's the captain. Sometimes it's not. The lookout men. Have you ever seen like those old ships? And you know, there's the crow's nest that's on the where the sails are. There's that little thing where the guy climbs up, and then they're the lookout. You know what I'm talking about? Their job was very important because they were on the lookout for enemy ships. Because remember, ships they didn't turn on a dime, right? So the lookout man was the one who looked for enemy ships. They were the one that looked for shallow places to make sure the ship didn't run aground. They were the one that looked for rocks and coastlines to make sure that the ship stayed safe. And the shipwrights, those are the people who build the ships. Now remember, all of these jobs, are these rich people or poor people? From what we read, what does it say? Poor. These are all going to be poor and common people. These are not going to be wealthy billionaires. These are going to be common working class people. Okay? You have to remember that. So these poor working class people have brought the city-state her power much more than the best-born and elite. So according to the old oligarch, who's responsible for Athens being rich and powerful? The rich people, the poor people. All right. So even after saying this, we had some people say it's not the rich people, according to this guy. That's the whole point of this document. It is the poor. Okay, the poor, the common people. So the rich people are not the ones that made Athens rich, right? According to the old oligarch. The rich people might be the ones that benefited, but it wasn't their work that made Athens rich. It was the poor, the people who were in the ships. Okay? So that part, again, we have to understand that. Does that part make sense? Got to know it was the poor people according to the old oligarch. Okay? So then he kind of switches gears here. That being so, it seems right that all or everybody should have a share in the offices filled by lot or by election. So with Athens, some jobs, they just put everybody's name in a pot and they just drew a name randomly, and whoever they picked, they got that job in the government. So not everybody voted for this. It was like, all right, we're throwing everybody's name in the pot. Whoever gets picked, that's who has the job. So what the old oligarch is saying is that if it's a job where everybody gets picked at random, it's only fair that the poor people who gave Athens its power should be in that group, right? They should have a fair shot to get their name picked as well. Because remember, government, they're the ones who make the rules, the ones who make the laws and stuff like that. So what he's saying is the poor people should have a say in that government as well. If there's something to be elected, if there's something to be voted for, the poor people should be able to run for that office. Okay? So again, they did some things by lottery, just picking it by random. If your name got picked, you had that job. They did some things by election where they voted. The old oligarch is saying that poor people should be involved in that. It shouldn't just be the rich and the best born who get to be in charge of the government. Everybody should have a say. And any citizen who wishes should be allowed to speak. Again, does the old oligarch say everybody should be able to say what they want? No. What group does he say should be able to speak? We're just guessing. Use your resources.
Any citizen.
Any citizen. So according to the old oligarch, any citizen, remember document A, we know this is going to be freeborn adult males whose parents were Athenian, right? So he's saying, hey, if you're a citizen, it shouldn't matter if you're rich or poor because the poor people helped us to get to this point. The rich people are the ones who are rich. So any citizen should be able to speak. Not necessarily any person, but any citizen. For if the poor and the common people and the worst elements are treated well, the growth of these classes will glorify the democracy. Now, for us living in 2023 in the United States, we've all grown up around democracies, around republics, around governments where people vote. Remember, in ancient Athens, this was the first government, right? Or excuse me, this is the first kind of government where everybody had a say. So that's going to be an important difference.